I'm Matt.
I'm Shane.
And if you like what you hear, make sure you hit that thumbs up button real hard, and make sure you subscribe to Comic Movie Marks.
And also click that little bell for all of the notifications.
Whee!
Always remember,
if Trailer Trash can do it,
anyone can do it.
Hello and welcome everyone to another Comic Movie Marks video.
We have a wonderful comicbook.com article titled M. Night Shyamalan explains why he turned down Marvel and DC Comics projects. Very lengthy title, but that's what we're breaking down here today.
It's not just the article itself, really. It's just kind of this environment in which directors and movie studios are in these days. And I think it's very intriguing to see his response to this. It's kind of interesting what the fans and the environment, the critics and so forth have made directors kind of rethink the idea of maybe taking on certain movie projects.
Absolutely. And Shyamalan had an interview, I guess, with Yahoo that was promoting Glass, I believe, is kind of where some of this comes from. And then comicbook.com, as well as several other websites, had kind of compiled this all into one article, pulled some quotes from it, and some very telling quotes at that.
So what are we talking about here? Well, M. Night Shyamalan, he talked about any offers or anything with DC or Marvel when it came to doing other superhero projects outside of his Unbreakable trilogy. So M. Night Shyamalan says, I want to make sure it's right for everybody. I have a strong filmmaking accent. It's very particular, and the best version of it is to keep the accent. When he asked if he would apply his perspective to Marvel or DC, are those movies, Marvel and DC superhero films, a place for that? Or is it appropriate for that?
Cheese and crackers.
He must have been sitting back in a lawn chair at one point watching all the shit Snyder went through. Because I feel like that is a direct comment towards what Snyder experienced when it came to his version of these comic book movies.
Yeah, it's really intriguing. I like that he says, you know, according to M. Night, he has been approached by Marvel and DC, and he even adds, because they in and of themselves have their own flavor, do they want this other Tabasco in there? So it's philosophically a question. It doesn't mean I'll never do it, but it's very hard to imagine filmmakers that have a heavy accent. I don't necessarily want them to make those movies. He's saying that he has a different flavor that he would add to these films, and would that make sense to do it that way, even though he has been approached, and, you know, something that Snyder obviously has had to deal with. And you could see, especially from another director's perspective, of someone wanting to try to pull maybe a superhero movie in a different direction, and then all of a sudden he's just getting panned and shit all over constantly, and people aren't open to that. And Matt and I have made this comparison several times before, that M. Night is another one of those directors. As soon as he's attached to something, people immediately are gonna shit on it one way or another, or, oh, he's his only successful movie is The Sixth Sense. And so it's very, very interesting to see him kind of go, no, I'll just stick with something that I created myself.
He says it's not fair to studios because they want to make their films in a certain language. And what if I said, hey, I'm going to do this 3-minute shot of the back of his head, and also want to make them very dark. And I want his motivation to be really ambiguous. And I want to challenge the audience to make them super uncomfortable. I want the studio to be okay with those things.
And just look how happy he is.
No way in shit is any studio going to be comfortable with anything of that nature, because this is what we got a little bit of taste with Snyder. Was he took it in a different direction. He made people uncomfortable. Superman snapped Zod's neck. It made people very uncomfortable, and they rejected the idea completely. And they started making up things saying that Superman never kills, when, of course, in the comics, Superman has killed Zod several times. And I just find this fascinating. He wants to challenge the audience. Challenge the audience? I don't think that's going to happen. Not in a superhero movie. Because, as Marvel has shown, it needs to have mass appeal. You need to stretch your material to every fabric, to every person possible. That's what's going to make your movie successful in this day and age.
Yeah, this quote, the one that you just read, I think to me was the most eye-opening, and I really feel in this quote he's specifically talking about what Snyder has dealt with. He talks about it being very dark, like the comparison that you made, possibly, you know, fucking breaking someone's neck. He wants motivation to be ambiguous, and he wants the audience to make them feel super uncomfortable. And the studio has to be okay with that. And those are things that Snyder wanted to take in a different direction and really explore. Nothing that hasn't been done before in the comics, but all of a sudden you fucking put it on the big screen and people are all, you know, shitting themselves and can't believe that that's not my Superman and all that bullshit. And this one, you could really tell where he's like, even though he gets panned all the time, it seems like Shyamalan's like, no, I'm glad I'm not in Snyder's shoes. And nor would I even want to do that, even though he's been approached, you know, maybe to do a story here or there for either DC or Marvel. It just doesn't seem like the mass audience really wants to have something portrayed any differently than, you know, what we've had, say, since the 70s.
You kind of see this more and more with these larger companies like Disney, like WB. And I even go back to the Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, the guys that originally were directing Solo and then got removed for Ron Howard. And they even have a quote saying, unfortunately, our version of the process weren't aligned with our partners on this project. We normally aren't fans of the phrase creative differences, but for once this cliche is true. We are really proud of our amazing and world-class work of our cast and crew. When it came to Solo, there was such a huge creative differences. These guys pretty much almost had this film done, and it got shit canned. Where are we going with movies these days? Is this really what studios are warping their versions of movies into? We get it, Hollywood, they're there to make money, and that's no secret, obviously. And also, having mass appeal, being able to be commercially successful is how you keep making movies. I completely understand that. But are we at a point now where risk has gone completely out the door?
The amount of money I'm going to be making would hurt your parents' feelings. You remember the class where I taught you all how to make it rain? That's what I'm going to be doing every single night. Dollar bills, y'all.
Are movies just going to be completely played safe nowadays? Are they going to be played in a way where we got to have this certain race here, we got to have this certain gender there, we got to have this and that, so that way, and we have to have plenty of jokes, family friendly, and that way this movie completes the trifecta of greatness that can completely reach that mass appeal of market, and they'll make money off of it, a huge chunk of money off of it. Are we at the point now where movies aren't going to have risk in them anymore? Yeah,
it really seems like it. And, you know, if you think about the films that have pushed the envelope a little bit more, that were, I guess, massively successful to more of the broad audience, like a Dark Knight, you know, or even somewhat like a Batman Begins or something like that, those wouldn't have happened if Christopher Nolan wouldn't have said, let me push the envelope in this direction a little bit more. Let me venture into this world and make this a little bit more grounded, and Batman's going to be on his own and it's going to be more realistic. We wouldn't have that if it wasn't for someone going, okay, let me try to take this character that's been established one way and, you know, maybe take him into a different direction. It's unfortunate that so many people, I guess, are tainted in a way that if a film is not done a very specific way, then it's not successful, then it's shit. You can't push the envelope in a direction anymore, and it's crazy to see, and we'll start to see more of how these universes are unfolding a little bit. Batman v Superman, films like that, Man of Steel, and Glass are now kind of the last of their kind. We will no longer have a Logan. Shit, we will, at this point, it almost seems like we'll no longer have like a Deadpool. So it's going to be really interesting to see, and I hope we get more directors like Shyamalan or Snyder who are willing to throw in their own flavor.
And it just seems like a lot of studios are just going to control what goes on in the future. I mean, we'll still get that every once in a while. You'll get that unique film. You'll get that Logan. You'll get it every once in a while, but it just feels like when they figure out that one movie, then they want to try to flip around that genre or that experiment, and then they try to make it mass appeal on the next one almost. And that's what they did with Deadpool. I mean, the first Deadpool was unique, not super groundbreaking, but it was low budget as hell, and it was able to have more creativity to it because it was such a low budget. They couldn't just go to the normal tropes all the time because they had the budget to do that. Then you see Deadpool 2, where they got a bigger budget and they just kind of went everywhere and they try to do that crash and burn style of jokes and everything. And then you see the Once Upon a Deadpool, you know, PG-13. They're experimenting with that now. You see the reaction around Glass. You're missing the point of the movie. You truly are. You truly are missing the very, very point of this movie and what filmmaking is. And it is an art. Speaking of Logan, I mean, you got a tweet here from James Mangold himself. At the point when work, writing, and directing big franchises has become the emotionally loaded equivalent to writing a new chapter of the Bible, with probable danger of being stoned and called a blasphemer, then a lot of bolder minds are going to leave these films to hacks and corporate boards.
But because this is a character, 75 years of stories have gone on with Superman, you're literally talking about a guy who has been through every single thing you can imagine, and every incarnation you can imagine. Horses, monkeys, dogs, you know, they've thrown the kitchen sink at this guy. That it's fun to be able to distill him down to that, like, what I would consider is just kind of like the best bits of him.
And the directors that get along the most with these studios are the ones that are going to be all over the place. Those are the ones you're going to see more and more.
One last thing I'll throw in here was a tweet from M. Night Shyamalan that he tweeted out yesterday. And I thought it was really cool. He says, as Glass movie opens around the world today, I feel so very lucky. Cinema has always been sacred to me, my religion in many ways. To be able to add my voice to the mix, I cannot thank the fans enough for making this happen. Here we go. And I thought that was such a great quote, and especially the part where he says to be able to add my voice to the mix, to throw in his own flavor, to his Tabasco, as he put it, into these types of movies. Pretty awesome.
In case I don't see you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. You're one of very few to make it to the end.
Yes, thank you very much.
Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Comic Movie Marks Podcast and hit the notification bell. You know, all these fucking YouTube channels say this shit, so I'm going to say it now.
Yes, it's perfect. And if you want to hear our full podcast, you can check out our podcast on iTunes or any other podcast subscription service.
Make sure you subscribe. Thanks again.